All right. Thank you very much. Again, my name's Pamela Smith. I'm the Vice President and General Manager for Ingram Library Services. It's the library business unit for Ingram Content Group. I'm going to start out by giving you just a little bit of background information about Ingram and why you would care who Ingram is. Then I want to talk to you a little bit about what was going on in the industry outside of academic, or what was going on in public libraries, what was happening on the retail side of the business and with publishers. So we'll start with just a little bit of background about Ingram. Ingram is the largest book distributor in the world. We have 25 locations worldwide, over 4,800 associates that work for us, and over access for over 22 million titles being either available or available through print on demand in our Lightning Source division. We work with over 60,000 imprints, and we are delivering all of this content as quickly as possible in both libraries as well as retailers, bricks and mortar, online retailers. And while we don't sell directly to consumers, we are providing information from publishers about their titles to consumers through a number of websites. A little bit more about our background. Of course, we have our Lightning Source business, as I mentioned, and we print over 6 million books per month in print on demand, and that can come from a variety of publishers. We work with tens of thousands of publishers, as well as retailers, as well as libraries. And one thing you may have heard about us is we do services for publishers. Back in April, we announced a partnership with Oxford University Press, and it's actually going live next week. We'll be doing, supplying books for Oxford. So instead of their having a warehouse in the United States to distribute throughout the US, they will be utilizing Ingram to do that distribution. So what does that really mean to you? Well, what it means is that OUP will have their inventory housed in the Ingram warehouses, and you don't have to change a thing. If you order direct from that publisher, then you can continue to do so. If you are ordering through a distributor, such as Ingram or ProQuest or YBP, any of those distributors, you continue to order through your distribution channel, and those orders will be picked, packed, and shipped as they need to be for either direct from the publisher or to your vendor if you're ordering from a vendor. Now, we do that for a number of clients, and there's a few others that are listed on the screen that you'll see there. A lot of university presses utilize our services, and we are happy to do so. All right, so let's get into the meat of our conversation and talk a little bit about the supply chain and what was going on there. There was, as is easy to understand, there was a lot of stress during this time frame for every industry. And that was very true for the print industry and for publishing. So in the supply chain, there were some shifts in printers, so that printing was difficult for publishers. You were having supply problems of getting books into the country from China. A lot of books are printed in China, especially those with color printing. So there were problems in getting supplies into the marketplace. The transportation, if you remember last Christmas even, how unreliable it was on when a package was going to be delivered. That continued all through the year. There were issues with prioritization and making sure that the shift over from the day-to-day was shifted more to what was going on with food and supplies that folks needed in their homes. In the public library sector, we deal a lot with public libraries. Obviously, there were lots of shutdowns and libraries across, especially urban libraries, were closed for a number of months before they started to slowly reopen over the time period. There were innovations in doing live programming through things like Zoom and like Teams, as well as starting to do curbside services and other ways of interacting with their patrons that was outside of the actual building itself. They did a lot of things from a digital standpoint in providing digital copies, as well as allowing those print items eventually to start flowing in and out of the library as well. So books actually saved the day. If you remember during 2020, a lot of us were at home for quite a number of weeks where everyone was encouraged to be home and only go out when essentially needing groceries or medication or whatever it might be. Then we needed something to do. There's only so much daytime television that one can watch, and books really saved the day. And that didn't matter that whether it was digital or it was print, but print books really soared from a impact in the marketplace from a consumer standpoint. In looking at the types of books that were available and what was growing, all types grew in terms of sales during 2020, but children's material, young adults, juvenile, that grew the most. But you did see it in every sector. Another area that grew quite heavily was in what we call direct-to-home services. So as your Amazon, Walmart, Target, all of those different vendors started concentrating more on food delivery or supplies, they outsourced a lot of their delivery of the print material to a vendor like Ingram, and Ingram's direct-to-home service on behalf of our retailers, either online retailers of any sort, books and bricks and mortar retailers as well with online presence. We were doing shipping on their behalf directly to consumers. So that grew quite well. In addition, because there was a longer period of time for those print materials to be very popular, folks decided they liked a particular author and they started looking at backlists so they could read more from that particular author or about that particular subject. So backlist really increased dramatically during that time period. Of course, we talked about online shopping. Everyone was online shopping. So here's a question, a rhetorical question. What's the average amount of time a day a person between the ages of 16 and 64 spends on social media? That answer is 2 hours and 25 minutes. So today, for instance, how many of you bought something online? Statistics show that 80% of us purchase something online already today. So we know that during that time, it increased quite heavily and it continued. From a digital standpoint, Ingram also has a division called CoreSource. We house and distribute ebooks, audiobooks to retailers, on behalf of publishers, to folks like Overdrive, to folks like Hoopla, So we are doing that delivery mechanism for them as well. And it grew dramatically during this time period. And audiobooks were extremely popular during the time frame. I know I enjoyed audiobooks, especially because you can multitask. So if you're, no matter what you're doing from inside the house, if you are cleaning or gardening outside or whatever you're doing, you can do some listening to ebooks along the way. So the numbers, as they say, tell the tale. At least 8 audiobooks were listened to on average by those that were utilizing that format. So this whole time, consumers became more willing to try something different, try different formats, try different methods. So if they were used to using one area, they were exploring so they could find different content. And they were willing to both purchase, do something from a rental standpoint, such as Netflix, but maybe it was Audible or one of the other rental areas. So that was became quite popular as well. So I know I need to wrap up so you can get to our other panelists, but I want to leave you with some key takeaways of what we learned during the time frame and what's really continuing as far as trends. First, when you want to look smart on Zoom or Teams, you have to get a great background of bookshelves. So during the time period, everybody was on a video conference. The credibility bookshelf was the key phrase. And in many cases, you know, you had to be careful about what the titles were that you were showing. If you had a real variety, because people will zoom in and look at the titles and make judgments of your credibility by looking at what you read. So everybody needs to get a great bookshelf behind them. Unfortunately, mine is not full of books right now. So in addition, when we look at that supply chain disruption, we are continuing along the trend of labor shortages. And that doesn't matter what industry you're in, whether it's in publishing or restaurants. Anywhere you drive by, you're going to see now hiring signs out looking for folks to hire. So labor is still going to be quite tight for a while. Transportation, trying to get things into the ports. You've seen all the ships out waiting to be unloaded. So we're still going to have that delay and that time frame. Again, printing, there are smaller numbers of places to have items printed. So therefore it is going to impact the number of titles that can be produced within the same amount of time, as well as the number of copies that publishers might get in a first run. And there might not be a second run of those titles. So you have to make sure that you are really keeping up with ordering ahead of time. There has been some talk about paper shortages, and I know we made sure that we had plenty from a lightning source print facility, but that is still a concern in the marketplace, that there will be some supply shortages there. I know filament tape, we use a lot of that in processing books for our customers, and we found that there is starting to be a little bit of a supply problem there. So making sure that you stock up. So what can you do? Make sure you're communicating with your vendor, whoever you order from, about what they're experiencing so that you can take advantage of that relationship you have with your vendor. Make sure that you're ordering early. Look at backlist titles. If you can't get the newest release on something, look at the backlist titles for that genre and see if you can find, and you will, find some really good titles in the backlist that you can use in the meantime. Anticipate that there are going to be delays. Know that transportation is not going to be overnight, as sometimes it is normally expected, and stock up in advance. So those are the items I can give you as advice. And now I will turn this over to Emily.
Thanks, Pamela. Hi, everyone. I'm going to share my, just going to share my presentation here. Okay. So hi, everyone. I'm Emily Tufts. I'm the Associate University Librarian at Ontario Tech University. A little bit about Ontario Tech Library. So I like to say we're small but mighty. We have a small dedicated staff. We are a shared library. So our library provides service for Ontario Tech University, which is a primarily undergraduate STEM-focused university, as well as Durham College, which we share a campus. And Durham College is a 2-year college. They have sort of an expanding suite of 3-year degree programs. So we serve 2 distinct user groups, the university and the college. We have always had a heavy emphasis on print acquisitions here at Ontario Tech Library because in the shared disciplines like engineering, business, IT, law, and criminology, we have relied on a shared print collection to stretch our budget resources. So we can purchase books that can be accessed by both the Ontario Tech University community and the Durham College community. And that allows us to stretch our budget resources. But our online resources are licensed separately. And so what this means is there's a certain amount of redundancy in those common disciplines where we might have to license an electronic resource like IEEE, for example, on both sides of the house. As I said, we're a small team, so we have 8 librarians and 10 technicians, and in normal times we have additional part-time staff, and we staff 3 branches. One of those branches, our main branch, is the shared library, and then we have a Durham College branch and an Ontario Tech branch as well. So I mentioned that pre-pandemic, our collection strategy leveraged the shared print collection heavily. We did have a limited number of ebook platform licenses through ProQuest and EBSCO, but we did, oh, we're not seeing the slides advance. Okay, let me see, I don't know. We did rely heavily on print collections as well as print periodicals, print standing orders, and print reserves. These were sort of like heavily used parts of the collection in our services. So part of our shared print collection strategy was for high use reference material. So we used to order things like Compendium of Pharmaceuticals, the DSM, a lot of legal resources were ordered in print with the knowledge that those would be shared between the 2 user groups. Okay, I just advanced the slide. I hope you guys are seeing this because I'm talking now about the pandemic pivot. So on March 18th, 2020, our campus shut down and the library closed. So all of the courses at both the university and the college switched to online delivery very rapidly. And of course, we lived through the same collective trauma that everyone else in the world was living through. We had an initial strong focus on staff and student wellness and the idea that we are making this transition in the midst of a global health crisis. I think we were all in shock. We were dealing with the shifting demands of working from home and our family care demands and that sort of dissolution of the division between work and life. In terms of the impact on library services, we lost access to that print collection. So that shared print collection that we had relied on to serve both of our communities was all of a sudden poof gone. We lost access to print reserves, which is one of our high use services, and access to all those print materials for research and assignments. So we made a few rapid adjustments in the spring of 2020. We increased the number of publisher platform licenses for ebook acquisition through Oasis from 2 to 16. So that was a big move that we made, and we prioritized ebook purchasing through the spring and summer of 2020. Of course, that was subject to cost and licensing. We also adopted new ebook acquisition channels. So we launched our first demand-driven acquisition pilot for ebooks through ProQuest Central, or eBook Central. And we also started exploring leased ebook content through sources like VitalSource for course reserves, so that we could offer those course reserves that were in use. We launched new services as well to provide access to the print collection. So we launched a digitization on demand service, which users could request digitization within copyright fair dealing, which is the equivalent of fair use in the States. We launched free home delivery via Canada Post, taking advantage of the Canada Post book rate, which allowed us discounted shipping on materials, so people could request content through the mail. And we also launched curbside pickup. We implemented an online reserve system using Ex Libris Leganto. And we pivoted to online delivery of all of our research and instructional support services. So lots of things changed that spring. It was a bit of a whirlwind. So looking at overall monograph spending by format, if we look sort of on the left side of this slide, we see our 2019-20, and we can see that ebook spending represented by the orange graph is much smaller than print book. We had a heavy reliance on print in 2019-20. Our spending was reduced overall in 2019-20 because we had a big library system migration that paused our purchasing for part of the year. But we can see our reliance on that shared print collection reflected in that sort of split between ebook and print book ordering. In 2020-21, we can see that overall monograph spending was higher, and a much higher proportion of our monograph spending was on ebooks. We did still purchase print material for both institutions. I think this is reflective of challenges around pricing for ebooks and license models for ebooks. And now in 21-22, we can see that our ebook spending is tracking to be much higher proportionally than print book spending. So we are seeing that our librarians are sticking with ebook purchases. Of course, many of our courses and curriculum is still being delivered online. So that explains the reliance on ebook. So in terms of challenges and opportunities, we experienced a lot of uncertainty during COVID. So our projected enrollment declined. There was a lot of uncertainty. It resulted in budget reductions across the institution, and we absorbed collections, but budget cuts in the library. In the collections budget, we saw a 10% cut to our collections budget. And we also, you pair that with the increased cost of ebook licensing. So we need to buy these ebooks. They tend to cost more, especially if we want to get good license terms on them where we can have unlimited users. And so we were kind of being squeezed from both sides there. We also have this challenge of faculty and student expectations. There's this expectations often for commercial textbooks, especially, that if an ebook is available for individual purchase, we should be able to get it in the library, and we know that that's not often the case. So we had to manage those expectations, and we saw obviously a major fall in circulation due to the closure of our library and our campus. So we were down. Circulation was down 96% from 19-20, and it remains low even though people are coming back to campus now. Our reference service was down 80%. Our visits were down 97%. So had a big impact on our services. So if I was to look into my crystal ball at what things are going to be like, you know, as we emerge from the year of the pandemic, I can see that there will be an expansion and a refinement of our ebook DDA programs. We've expanded that initial DDA pilot from engineering into education as well. We're starting to explore publisher EBA options. So exploring evidence-based acquisition models, because we're going to need to continue to support a hybrid model of course delivery. I think the genie's out of the bottle as far as online course delivery goes. A lot of students are expressing that they prefer it. It allows us to draw on a larger pool of students if we can offer them online and hybrid delivery of their courses. So I think there will be a continued emphasis on that model, and the library is going to have to step up in terms of our electronic resource acquisition. So that's what we were doing at Ontario Tech, I'm going to stop my share and I'm going to pass it over to Sarah. Thanks, everyone.
All right, thank you, Emily. Let me see if I can't get my slides going. All right, I'm gonna assume you can see them unless you tell me otherwise. All right, let's start moving. Okay, so I'm Sara Duff. I'm the Acquisitions and Collection Assessment Librarian at the University of Central Florida. Here in Orlando, we are a very large school. We have over 70,000 students. We have over 230 degree programs. We have a lot of research and a lot of doctoral programs. So we really do have a high level of research going on. We're a little bit of a complex organism. We have a lot of branch campuses. We have some joint use libraries. And at UCF here, we're about 20% first generation college students. And we're also federally designated an HSI, which is a Hispanic serving institution, which I think we actually, our president just accepted a medal related to that in Washington, DC, just this week, I believe. So at UCF, because we are so large and because we are supporting so many degree programs, so many students, we have tried basically every acquisition model. If it has been proposed out there, we have tried it. We've done everything. We have several evidence-based programs. We have a DDA program. We buy firm order, we buy packages. But with all of this, we do still have a very strong support for print. There are a lot of materials that we really find you can only get in print, and some that are just way more cost effective to get in print. We do still have an approval plan, and it's pretty robust. We did have to trim it down because you know, last year the budget was just kind of not there at the beginning of the year. It was really, I think this is probably true for a lot of libraries, that it was really sort of around this time last year, it was really still just sort of a swirl of question marks as to what our final numbers were going to be. So we really had to take action to reduce our approvals so that, you know, we could at least curb some of the spending, because with print books, you can pick them up later. It's relatively easy. And we did end up doing that. Once we got our final numbers and with some sort of end of year money around March, we were able to get some of, you know, the fill in for books that would have shipped on approval if we had left our plan the same. So we have what's called an automated retrieval center here. And this is something that the students specifically asked for. The automated retrieval center is like temporary storage, but it is attached to the library. So we can still fulfill these print requests very quickly. I think it's usually between 10 and 15 minutes. People request them from the catalog and then they can just pick them up at the circulation desk. So it has been working pretty well. Not all of our materials are in the ARC, but a lot of our stacks are in there. And as they're renovating the library, they're kind of going floor by floor and more things are moving there. But there are a lot of areas here at UCF that really do prefer print. Even when we've, say, purchased an entire ebook package, I have had faculty complain that, yeah, sure, you have every single book in this package, but I still want to get them in print. And it's a little frustrating. But you know, there is still a lot of these areas, I think usually in the humanities, that really do prefer reading in print. We try not to duplicate. If we have a DRM-free ebook, we do try not to duplicate in print, but it does happen sometimes. But yeah, print is definitely cheaper for a lot of publishers. So our approval plan is able to kind of go a little farther. We're able to pick up a little more if we don't turn it on to e-preferred for all areas. We do have some areas on our approval plan as e-preferred, but we have pretty strict price controls for those ebooks, so it doesn't get too out of hand. We can kind of control the cost a little bit. And of course, there are always going to be materials that don't translate easily to ebooks. You know, a lot of these art books are not going to be available, and things like that. So there's always going to be things that you just cannot get as an ebook, or you can't get in a favorable user model. It's funny, I was thinking about this, getting this presentation together, that we really try not to buy single user ebooks because we have so many students, but yet we buy a lot of print. So we'll buy a print book before we would buy the book in single user ebook, unless there's some sort of really good argument for getting that single user. And I think that's because when someone sees a print book or sees that we have a print book, they understand what that means. They understand that if someone is using this book, I cannot use it. But they don't understand the single user ebook model in the same way. So we get a lot of questions when someone has checked out the whole book and we only have it single user and someone can't access it. We do get those sort of questions in chat all the time. So it really does confuse people from time to time. Okay, so what happened during the pandemic for us? Well, our philosophy really didn't change very much regarding print. Of course, there were things that didn't ship in time, particularly with some of our journals or with things published in the UK. I think there was either issues with the printers there or issues with the transportation there, and some things just didn't show up in time or were temporarily halted for a few weeks. But in general, we really didn't change too much. Florida didn't really close down in a lot of ways. I mean, the state of Florida was back open in early May 2020. UCF allowed employees back in the library around that time, maybe not until June 2020, and then students were allowed back in the library that fall 2020. So even though classes were really still online, people were on campus then. And this fall, it's sort of a back to normal, quote unquote, as normal as you can get right now, I guess, in that there are a lot of students on campus. Of course, students are still taking online classes if they want, but a lot of classes are in person, for better or for worse. So I would say there's definitely fewer students on campus, even though our enrollment has not really changed too drastically. So I think there are a lot of students still just taking online classes, but things are getting pretty close to where they were before. I do think there is a little bit more openness toward ebooks from some folks who had sort of been hesitant to use ebooks before, but I kind of already see them reverting to their old ways. So I don't know how permanent of a change that is, but time will tell. So here's a little chart that I put together, and I know this says print loans, but this should really say physical item loans because I didn't take out, DVDs or anything like that. So you can see there's a pretty big drop. This is just for August 1st through September 31st of the respective year. So, you can see 2019 was very high, and then a huge dip in 2020. We were still loaning things by mail. We would mail them to students, and then people could come in the library during that time. And then this semester, excuse me, it's definitely higher than this time last year, but certainly not back to where we were pre-pandemic. But I do think that we'll probably get there. But going forward, we'll continue chugging right along. It's not like our budget has increased. Numbers are still as unstable as they ever were. But we will still continue purchasing, ebooks and prints. And our approval plan, we have not restored yet to what it was pre-pandemic, but we are hopeful that maybe next year we'll be able to turn it back on to what it was. We are still getting approval books. It's just scaled back. It's probably a third to maybe closer to a half smaller than it was pre-pandemic. But print is always going to be there. It's always going to be a pillar of our strategy. So let's turn it back over to Bob and see if there are questions.
Just do something here. Well, it's the best I can do for sharing this slide. It doesn't matter. Are there any questions from people in the room to begin with? No questions from the room. Is there anything in the chat? My facilitator, have you noticed anything in the chat? Any questions? We have like 1 minute left, so I will put Pamela Smith on the spot, I think, and give her that minute or some portion of that minute to answer this question. So Pamela, that was pretty big news. It was even in the press. You would read about it in the New York Times and Washington Post when Oxford outsourced much of its operation to Ingram. As a lot of other, I mean, a dozen other large academic publishers had done prior to Oxford. They didn't hit the news like Oxford did. But why are publishers doing that? Why are publishers taking work that they used to do themselves and asking Ingram to do it on their behalf? Do you want to answer that question if as best you can, please?
I will be happy to try. I would say that there are a number of reasons, and part of it is in terms of supply to their customer base. So when books are stocked in our facility, and we have 4 across the U.S., we're going to ship from the closest warehouse to that particular customer. And whatever they're shipping, we're shipping on their behalf is delivered faster. It is also a smaller carbon footprint because we are shipping from the closest location. And if they're using our print-on-demand services, they don't have the inventory that they're storing. There's not, you're not printing things that you don't actually need. So it is truly print on demand. Within 24 hours of an order, it's ready to go. So those are some of the reasons, as well as just having that extra expertise, because distribution is our expertise. They don't have to worry about that. They are worrying more about the content as well as the client base, marketing to that client base so that they are getting the information about their authors and their titles out to the public.
Pamela, for being so gracious, for so graciously answering that question at the end of our time. And I want to thank everybody here in the room in Charleston for attending our panel. And I'd like to thank all of you out there in the world, wherever you are, from attending the panel as well. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.